you. Good evening and welcome to Hackney Council Chamber. It's good to be back again in Hackney's Planning Committee. My name's Councillor Vincent Stopps and I shall be chairing this evening's meeting. Particular welcome to Sarah with us for her first meeting. The council will be recording this meeting. Proceedings will also be being live streamed, so please be aware that the camera might be put onto you. Now we're back in meeting in person. Councillors voting this evening are here tonight and are not taking part remotely as we have done for the past year. We'll be undertaking the meetings in as close a fashion as we can to our normal format for these meetings. The virtual meeting technology does have a chat function. Please only use it to raise technology related issues. Nor the officers, apart from the IT officer, will be looking at that. When your camera is turned on during the meeting, please ensure that you are visible. Participants who have registered their interest to speak in the meeting should only speak when invited by me. If anybody deliberately disrupts the meeting, we have the capability of removing you from the remote meeting. In the event of an internet outage, we'll adjourn, and whilst the technology is sorted out, hopefully, and we'll come back together afterwards. Can I then firstly introduce members? So I will introduce Sarah first. Welcome. Sarah Young. Yes, Councillor Young. Councillor AJ Chauhan, Councillor Brian Bell, and Councillor Steve Race. To my left is our Head of Planning. Our legal advisor, who you can't see off screen, is Sam this evening, and our Governance Service Officer is Gareth. Welcome back, Gareth, to the meeting. You've been away for a few months. There are planning and design and transport officers using the conference call technology to advise us today, and there are objectors and applicants here, some in person and some will be joining us remotely. For this first item, they're all here in person. Before moving to the agenda, can I take a couple of minutes to explain how the meeting will proceed? We'll hear each application summarised by the officers, a 5-minute statement from objectors, and similarly a 5-minute statement from the applicant. Members will then be free to ask questions. It's my role as chair to make sure members have all the information they need to make a decision, objectors and applicants have their say, and that the meeting runs properly. I'll not be taking any contribution from the floor. This is a meeting in public, but not a public meeting, and you must have given notice to the Governance Service Officer before the meeting to register to speak. As I've said, objectors and applicants will have strictly 5 minutes. If there's more than one of you, you'll need to decide how to divide that 5 minutes between you. Members are not representing either their wards nor their political parties. We make our decisions on the basis of any site visits we've made, what we have read in the reports, and of course what we hear this evening. We must only take account of policies adopted by this council, other material planning policies and material planning considerations. Can I emphasise that members should not discuss nor take account of non-material planning matters? Members making the decision do not have allowed themselves to prejudge any application prior to the meeting. Similarly, if they have an interest in the site or the people involved, they should declare that interest and may remove themselves from the decision. When we've finished our deliberation, we'll vote on the recommendation. When the decision is made, that's the end of the matter for members, for the committee. The applicant may appeal our decision to the Secretary of State. Objectors may seek legal redress and advise you to seek professional advice in either case. Finally, we'll be taking a break probably about 8 o'clock, but that will fit in with the agenda items. And now we'll move to the agenda. But just before that, I'll welcome 2 members that have just come in. Hamara, welcome. It's your first planning committee. And Councillor Joseph, welcome to you. Thank you very much indeed. So, apologies for absence.
Okay, Chair, I am aware of apologies from Councillor Levy and Councillor Hanson. Just to let you know, I should contact Councillor Papier to act as a substitute. Completely, but I'm not aware of Councillor Papier coming back to me.
Okay, thank you. Declaration of interest, do we have any, Steve? You have one?
I've been involved in the regeneration board for children's rights, so I'll accuse myself.
Okay, anybody else? No, I have none. So item 3, there's nothing that the monitoring officer has asked us to consider. We don't have the minutes.
I'll hopefully get those circulated to the planning service next
Okay,
week.
and so we'll move on to substantive items this evening, and that is Olive School, 2 to 4 Lower Clapton Road. And it's Barry that is presenting to us. Barry, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me, Chair?
Thank you.
I'll just present my screen. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Just going to get the laser pointer up. Okay, this item relates to the Olive School site at the former police station site at 2 to 4 Lower Clapton Road. The site is located on the southern side of Lower Clapton Road, adjacent to St John's Churchyard and Clapton Square. You can see the site boundary outlined in red. Lower Clapton Road is just to the north, St John's Churchyard to the west, St John's Church Road is located to the south, and Row Lane is to the east. This is a photograph showing the front elevation on Lower Clapton Road, the former police station building. This is a side elevation showing the view from Lower Clapton Road looking east. This is a view looking south and north on Churchwell Path, which is a cycle route and part of TfL's Quiet Ways network. This is a view looking east on St John's Church Road. One of the entrances to the school is on the left picture here where my pointer is. This is an image of the completed school, which includes the renovated listed building and a 3-story building to the rear. So this application is to amend the wording of condition 30 attached to planning permission. Sorry, Chair, just before I go on, I think there's a bit of background noise in the chamber. Maybe it needs to be muted.
Sorry.
He's got some background.
Do we want to mute the background?
Okay.
Okay, let me turn them.
Okay. Yeah, this application is to amend the wording of condition 30 attached to planning permission 2019-4259, which allowed the redevelopment of the subject site to provide a new school of 630 pupils, including the erection of a 3-story block to the rear of the listed former police station. The application was originally refused planning permission by the council due to concerns relating to heritage and transport, but was granted on appeal by the Secretary of State. Members are reminded that the principle of the development has already been established by the inspector's decision and is not under reconsideration here. This application is focused solely on the amended wording of the condition and the planning merits thereof. The development has now been completed and 180 students occupied the school in the last academic year. So as I mentioned, this is the completed school, which is fully ready for occupation, but is only restricted by the condition we're discussing today. The condition to which the application relates is condition 30, which requires an incremental increase of pupils at the site until the school reaches full capacity. The condition was imposed by the planning inspector at appeal in order to address officer concerns relating to the catchment area of the school and the transferring of pupils from the school's temporary sites by minibus. The condition originally required 90 pupils to occupy in the first year, increasing by 90 pupils a year until at full capacity, but this was amended by a minor material amendment application last year to allow the school to have 180 pupils in its first year, growing by 90 year on year thereafter until full capacity. The current proposal is for the condition to be reworded so that the school can be occupied at full capacity from the start of the next school year, 2021-22. The total capacity of the school would remain unchanged at 630 pupils. So this just shows you the existing wording of condition 30 and the bits to be removed. So it would no longer require the incremental increase in students and would just restrict the full capacity of the school. The amendment has been requested due to issues that have arisen with the temporary sites intended to accommodate the school pupils who are unable to attend the permanent site due to the current wording of condition 30. The school is currently operating across 3 sites the permanent site at Lower Clapton Road, a temporary site at New City College Hoxton, and a further temporary site at Cazenove Road. Both temporary sites are no longer available from the start of the next school year, and the original intention was to accommodate 360 students at a new temporary site at Brook Road. However, the contractors who were constructing the school at Brook Road went into administration at the start of the pandemic, and works have not been able to proceed that would allow students to be accommodated at that site from next September. Alternative options to temporarily accommodate the 360 pupils have been explored by the Department of Education, but no other suitable sites have been found. So just turning to this map, which shows the temporary and permanent sites. So this is the
Barry,
permanent site. Yep.
I'm afraid we lost you about 3 or 4 minutes ago.
3 or 4 minutes ago. Should I start from the beginning?
No. I think you need to start where you started talking about the condition. So you had a slide up there.
This
So
one?
start again from there.
Okay. The condition to which this application relates is condition 30, which requires an incremental increase of pupils at the site until the school reaches full capacity. The condition was imposed by the planning inspector at appeal in order to address officer concerns relating to the catchment area of the school and the transferring of pupils from the school's temporary sites by minibus. The condition originally required 90 pupils to occupy in the first year, increasing by 90 pupils a year until at full capacity, but this was amended by a minor material amendment application last year to allow the school to have 180 pupils in its first year, growing by 90 year on year thereafter until full capacity. The current proposal is for the condition to be reworded so that the school can be occupied at full capacity from the start of the next school year, 2021-22. The total capacity of the school would remain unchanged at 630 pupils. So this slide shows the previous wording of the condition, which has been struck through, and the remaining wording, which would just relate to the restriction on the full capacity of pupils. The incremental increase restriction would be removed. The amendment has been requested due to issues that have arisen with the temporary sites intended to accommodate the school pupils who are unable to attend the permanent site due to the current wording of condition 30. The school is currently operating across 3 sites: the permanent site at Lower Clapton Road, a temporary site at New City College Hoxton, and a further temporary site at Cazenove Road. Both temporary sites are no longer available from the start of the next school year, and the original intention was to accommodate 360 students at a new temporary site on Brook Road. However, the contractors who were constructing the school at Brook Road went into administration at the start of the pandemic, and works have not been able to proceed that would allow students to be accommodated at that site from next September. Alternative options to temporarily accommodate the 360 pupils have been explored, but no other suitable sites have been found. So this site shows the location of the permanent site and the temporary site. So the permanent site is where my pointer is here, at Lower Clapton Road, and the current temporary sites are Cazenove Road to the north of the borough, and at New City College, Hoxton, in the south of the borough. It's worth pointing out that there's also a pickup point for minibuses. So the current situation means that the pupils of the school are spread across the 3 sites: Lower Clapton Road, Cazenove Road, and New City College. Pupils who live near Cazenove Road or who or have to transfer to the temporary site in New City College by coach, either that or some pupils are dropped off by their parents, and a situation has arisen as a result of the condition where pupils may be dropped off at 3 different sites by parents or by people sharing cars. The Brook Road site is located here. As I mentioned, the works to construct the temporary site here have been unable to be completed due to the contractors going into administration. The proposal to remove the restriction in condition 30 is therefore necessitated by a need to find accommodation for those pupils intended for the temporary site on Brook Road. In considering the proposal, officers have been mindful that the school was due to be fully occupied by 25-26, so the key considerations are whether or not bringing forward full capacity to 21-22 would have an unacceptable impact upon the surrounding transport network. Data relating to trip numbers at the school, which is now partly informed by real-world data rather than projections, has been carefully assessed by officers. It is considered that, subject to a number of additional mitigation measures, the impacts of allowing the school to be occupied at full capacity could be appropriately managed, such that the amended wording of the condition would be acceptable. So this slide lists the different mitigation measures that have been secured. So in total, the contributions would amount to £225,000. these are all in addition to anything that was secured previously. They would include 40,000 towards the upgrade of the existing school street on St. John's Church Road. That would include the provision of ANPR cameras, so that's automobile number plate registration identification cameras, which help with enforcement. Also, there's 135,000 towards expanding the existing school streets that serve the school, and provisional locations include Sutton Place, Clapton Square, and Sutton Square. There would also be 25,000 towards dedicated assistance from the borough's travel plan officer to allow more active engagement with pupils in the school, and a further 25,000 towards wider awareness campaigns and interventions around the school. This slide shows you the location of the prospective new school streets areas. That includes Clapton Square, Sutton Square to the south of the site, and Sutton Place further to the south. So St. John's Church Road is already a school street, so there'd be quite a significant expansion of the school street zone funded by the school. There's also a provision for new enforcement cameras, which would be located on St. John's Church Road, as well as cameras which would help enforce the expanded school streets.
Barry, you've cut out again with the council chamber. So if you could just hold fire for a second, please.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Barry, we can see you. Apologies to everybody who's looking in and taking part. I think this is the first time in 18 months that we've had problems. So Barry, you were telling us about, I think we finished seeing how much money, additional travel planning resource was being proposed. So we'd finish this screen, yes.
Okay. You can hear me okay, yeah? I assume that means yes. I'll continue. So yeah, this was the following slide, which just showed some of the locations of the proposed mitigation measures. So the shaded areas here are the proposed expanded school streets areas, which would include Clapton Square, Sutton Square to the south, and Sutton Place further to the south. So St. John's Church Road is already a school street, so these would be expanded areas. There's also provision for ANPR cameras, which would be located on St. John's Church Road to enable enforcement of the existing school streets. And there'd also be provision for such cameras in the other expanded school streets areas. The other measures include some awareness campaigns, which would help alleviate. I heard a message come up there. Can everybody hear me okay, yeah? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, if you just say Barry to continue.
Barry, please continue.
Okay, sorry. It sounded like I lost you there. So as I was saying, yeah, this sets out some of the additional mitigation measures. So it's worth pointing out that a lot of these measures, none of these measures were secured with the original permission, and many of them would continue beyond the 25-26 when the school would be a full occupation. So they'd actually represent a long-term improvement in mitigation measures as opposed to the original consent. Overall, the proposed mitigation measures are considered sufficient to make the removal of the restriction in condition 30 acceptable. Moreover, the scope of the secured works would mitigate the transport impacts at the school in the short, medium and long term, which is considered to be a significant benefit of the proposal. The proposal is considered acceptable in all other respects. Accordingly, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
I think the recommendation A, all you've done is add in the original recommendation to this condition. Is that right?
Yeah, there was some discussion between ourselves and the applicant as to whether or not the full suite of conditions needed to be reattached, given the kind of stage this development is at. But the applicant has asked for the full set to be attached, so that's why they're included in full in the addendum.
Okay, thank you. Okay, over to applicant. Right, we've got so Abigail and Baba. Please, you've got 5 minutes between you.
Good evening. My name is Abigail Evans from HSP Consulting Engineers, and I'm the retained transport consultant for the school. Operating Olive School across multiple sites has been logistically challenging for the pupils, parents and staff, so relocating all pupils to the application site is viewed favourably by the school community. This will also allow the travel plan for the whole school to be implemented more effectively. If the Section 73 application is approved, then all pupils can be taught at the application site. No increase in the school's total pupil capacity is proposed. IRIS officers have agreed that with the existing proposed transport mitigation measures, the school will not have a detrimental impact on the surrounding transport network. As well as expanding and enhancing the School Streets initiative, the applicant will fund enhanced travel plan support from Hackney officers, which will support the school to reach its mode share targets and increase the use of sustainable transport further. 3/4 of pupils have siblings at the school. As a result, many parents are already travelling to the application site, either directly or as a combined trip to other Olive School sites. Therefore, if the requested 360 pupils transfer to the application site, many of their parents are or will be travelling to the site already due to having children in reception year 1 and year 2. The overall number of car journeys generated by the school on Hackney's road network will reduce if this application is approved. This is because the application site is in a better location in terms of pupil catchment and public transport accessibility than the temporary sites and City College. With all pupils located at one site, the need for parents to transport pupils to and from multiple school sites will be removed, which reduces the need to travel by car and strengthens the viability of using sustainable transport. In addition to the reduction in car trips, There will no longer be a need for the school buses, minibuses, there's currently 5 of them that travel to and from New City College to Stoke Newington Common at the start and end of every school day. Many of the mitigation measures, as pointed out in the committee report, to support this application will remain in place beyond the point where the school would have been at full capacity in the original scenario. The additional mitigation measures will provide a long-term solution to help minimise the impact of the school on residents and the local area for years to come. I will now hand over to the school's head teacher, Baba Mirza.
Thank you, Abigail. Dear committee members, my name is Baba Mirza and I'm the principal of Olive School, Hackney. The pupils, parents and staff have been through significant challenges since the school opened 7 years ago. The COVID-19 pandemic has made an already difficult situation far more challenging. Operating over multiple sites, striving for educational excellence and maintaining positive mental health and well-being has not been easy. In fact, it has been incredibly difficult. The patience and resilience that our school community has demonstrated has been remarkable. The benefits to allowing our new permanent building to be occupied at full capacity is clear. No more travelling between multiple sites. Pupils will no longer need to miss 20 to 30 minutes of learning time daily to catch a minibus. That's 3 weeks every year. PE lessons will no longer take place in inadequate, cramped spaces. Pupils will no longer have to miss after-school clubs and enrichment activities because their sibling is on another site. No more eating lunches from plastic takeaway containers. No more queuing up or walking through other classrooms to use the toilets. Key specialist support staff and school leadership will no longer be spread thinly across multiple sites and will be available all day, every day. We will all feel far less vulnerable during any future COVID-19 outbreak. The school leadership team and staff are committed to sustainable travel and are actively working as part of the travel plan initiatives with parents to ensure car travel is avoided. Since occupying the new permanent building, we have been good neighbours, liaising with the church and local residents, listening to their views and ideas. We look forward to strengthening our partnerships with them. Whilst we are fully committed to the government's education recovery plan, our efforts will seriously be hindered if we continue to operate on multiple sites. I therefore hope that you will approve this application.
Thank you very much. Okay, before we go to questions, so Sarah and Amara, you're happy with the process? You following it okay? Okay, do you have any questions at all then?
No.
Sarah?
I'm not sure if this is in the papers and I've missed it. I was wondering if we had any information about where children are travelling to the school from at the moment. So, you know, are they all coming from a particular area or from all over London or all over East London?
Yes, please.
I'll answer that question. Yes, the information is contained not so in the committee report, but in the transport statement that was submitted with the application, which has the pupil postcode plots for the pupils at the application site and that are currently in the temporary. So most of the pupils are live within 2 kilometres of the site. What we're seeing is the pupils. Yeah, sorry, we got a bit of rain.
Speak over the rain.
Speak over the rain. So most of the pupils do live within a 2 kilometre catchment. In fact, what we're seeing with the pupils that are in reception year 1 and next year there'll be the new reception cohort, is that they are actually living even closer to the site than that, more like 1 kilometre, 2 kilometre. There are still a few that are living a little bit further away, but what we have done a detailed demonstration of in the transport statement is that there are adequate public transport, particularly bus routes, to connect those pupils. And it's not necessarily, what we also realised from our survey is that where pupils live is not actually a major factor in the choice of their travel either. So many of the ones living further away are actually using public transport. So.
And just to follow up from that, so if they're 1 to 2 kilometres away, you're talking about 1 to 2 kilometres kind of in a circle around the school, or coming from?
Yeah, so we have shown it with a crow's flight circle, and we have shown plans, maybe not in this application previously, with walking routes as well. And that was initially we've done that with walking routes, and that was within 2 kilometres, yeah.
So we can ask the same question, and we should do, of our transport officers. So Joe, what's been the learning in terms of travel planning exercise that we've done over the last year?
I think in terms of the existing 180 pupil catchment, whilst the council have conducted, for example, site visits, we've still received a number of different complaints about vehicular traffic, about inappropriate parking, generally enough to flag a level of concern based on a relatively small number of pupils. And I think in terms of what the applicants have outlined, I would concur with that the transport statement is very professionally put together, but I think we as officers have had consistent concerns about the reliability of those projections. I think there's just too much inherent volatility in the projections, and that's why in a number of different meetings with the applicant, with Abigail, for example, and the principal of the school, we really have come to the conclusion that those contributions really are required to mitigate what we perceive as really quite a high level of private car use in terms of pickups and drop-offs.
Doesn't it? Whereas you'd expect 10% of our other schools. Is that right?
Sorry, could you just repeat the question?
Reading the report, I think 29% of pupils are arriving by car, whereas you'd expect 10% at our community schools. Is that right?
Yeah, so speaking to a colleague in the School Streets team today, they said that the kind of private vehicle use that they saw was definitely one of the highest that they've seen in Hackney. I think in the transport statement, it was 36% for this site. I think a hands up survey across the sites.
Sorry, Joe. Joe, sorry to interrupt you. They've lost connection again.
No problem.
Hold for a second, please.
Yeah, I'll hold.
Thanks.
Good afternoon.
Okay, Joe, I can see you again. So you were talking about the relative car use of this school compared to others.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking to colleagues in the School Streets team, they were saying that definitely this is one of the highest sort of modal share figures that they've seen. And what I would definitely say is that the applicant has done a sterling job of presenting data that shows that there will be incremental reductions year on year, and especially with the geographic catchment area reducing to 1 to 2 kilometres, it is likely that you may get more use of sustainable transport modes. But the main concern for us is we just do not have an adequate level of proof, especially in the kind of post-pandemic era, that there isn't going to be a continued level of car dependency. And that's why we absolutely kind of moved to a position where we need to get really robust measures in to expand that school street area from St John's Church Road, and combine that with a really kind of bolstered travel plan monitoring process.
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of a follow-up, really, Joe. I mean, I understand the idea of the school streets. It's still there.
Yes.
But surely, even if we expand slightly, there's still going to be streets on the periphery where parents can drive up to, and I'm just a bit worried about the effect for residents living there. When we advertise this, were the proposed school streets included as something that residents could comment on?
Joe.
I am so sorry. I could only sort of hear probably.
So I'll summarise it then, Joe. So Councillor Joseph said, yes, we've got school streets, but clearly that will displace people to park elsewhere, and what the impact on that is going to be.
I think the point that Councillor Joseph raises is a very pertinent one, and a very common one with things like school streets and low traffic neighbourhoods. So what we would say absolutely is you may have a level of displacement, and that's why we would absolutely be looking to research and find out the most appropriate streets to expand that school street zone to. So Clapton Square and the other streets. You may still have a further level of displacement, and that's why we would want a contribution for much more robust travel plan monitoring, and to work with the school to ensure that parents and pupils are encouraged to use the most sustainable modes possible. And I think as research does generally show, but it's a tricky field, that when you do have these more robust infrastructure-based measures, or for example ANPR measures, you will begin to see a level of traffic evaporation as opposed to displacement. So it's quite a sort of complicated picture, but that evaporation of people deciding not to drive to school because it's too complicated, they'll get tickets, and the school is doing a sterling job of promoting active and sustainable transport, and finally they live within a catchment of 2 kilometres. That kind of multifaceted approach is what we're really looking to secure today. And I think that the main point to emphasise is that with this application, there's not an increase in pupil numbers, but so that doesn't change. But what really would change is over £200,000 in contributions to get these kind of sustainable transport measures in. And I think that's a real benefit for local residents and for the school as well.
More questions? AJ.
Yeah, just on this condition 8.21, I just want clarification. So you're going to introduce provisional school streets, is that correct? And will they be operational from the start of the academic year, 2nd of September? And will these provisional school streets have ANPR, just written it down, cameras on them? That's what I'm not sure about on this condition.
So Joe, the 2 proposals, where are they in terms of the pipeline and possibilities of actually happening?
Yeah, so again, it's a really good question. At the moment, you've got St John's Church Road is an operational school street, but it doesn't have a tangible method of enforcement. So the ANPR camera would be, the idea is to install that, and we would certainly be aiming for 2021-22. So ideally September, although realistically there may be a little bit of delay. That's certainly what we'd be aiming for. And then the other locations, for example, Clapton Square, Sutton Place, they would be subject to traffic surveys and research. In terms of the word, I'm not sure the word provisional. My understanding is that obviously subject to ensuring that they're appropriate locations and that they have any displaced traffic coming through them, we'd absolutely be working to install those. And it would be with ANPR technology, because that's viewed as the, in inverted commas, gold standard of enforcement on school streets, and actually on sort of low traffic neighbourhood measures in general.
Is it this year? Is it after September, or?
So we would endeavour absolutely as quickly as possible to get that school street expanded. So again, I think 2021-22 academic year is what we would be striving towards, but we certainly wouldn't want to give a sort of false commitment.
Okay, that was the answer you wanted, wasn't it? Okay, there was one more, Steve.
Yeah, thanks. Joe, thank you, Chair. Joe just said 21-22 school year, academic year. Is that the beginning of the year? Is it the middle?
Start September, I think.
No, it's not. I'd like to hear him say that.
Yeah, so in terms of the St John's Church Road, absolutely, as you know, as soon as we've finalised the, hypothetically assuming that things are approved today, once we finalise the Section 106 contribution, we begin the surveys for aiming for September.
Joe, you need to say that again.
Aiming for September, absolutely.
We'll follow on. Did you hear me?
Sorry, I didn't hear it.
So what I understood was you confirmed that you're aiming at September 21 for St John Church Street, but for the others to follow on in the same academic year, if at all possible.
That's exactly right. Yeah, absolutely.
I think we know where the officers are coming from.
Can I ask a process question about that? Presumably the planning subcommittee doesn't make a decision about.
We don't make a decision.
That's an entirely separate.
It absolutely it is. It is.
So even if we make this decision,
it is
based on the hope, perhaps expectation that a school street will appear, may or may not.
Yes.
I'm happy to provide an additional comment to that, but.
Yes, go on then, Joe.
Yeah. So I think just to say the point the councillor made is true, that we couldn't give 100% assurity, but what I would say is school streets are so integral to our transport policies that obviously we are obliged to consult on them, and we will absolutely take into concern and consideration residents' objections. But my understanding is that all school streets are installed in general. It's a programme that is very much supported, and obviously we're intending to expand it by 3 streets. If that wasn't Clapton Square, for example, it would absolutely be our intention to expand to a street that was heavily trafficked relative to Olive School's pupil pick up and drop offs, if that makes sense.
Okay, I think we know where we are anyway with it. AJ?
Just one, let's rephrase it. These additional school streets, before they're implemented, can there be mitigating situations, putting like private traffic wardens enforcing parking or something like that? Because you're going to get 28% of these cars coming into these 2 streets that aren't school streets.
Okay, so the question is, can we have any manual intervention, I guess, in terms of managing the streets in the meantime?
Is that a question for me?
Well, it's to Barry as well, I think. So if it is chaos, let's say, and the people of Clapton Square are making a hell of a fuss because there's dozens of cars parked up their street that they weren't expecting, that are, I guess, illegally parked if they shouldn't be. Would the council be able to intervene in terms of its warden system?
I can respond in part on that. So the existing operational management plan and travel plan requires marshals to be on the street to enforce the measures set out within the travel plan in terms of staggered closing times, in terms of drop-off locations. So it would be possible technically to expand that, and provided the applicant was happy with that, we could potentially discuss that happening. I don't know if Joe wants to step in and kind of cover anything further there.
No, I would just concur with what Barry said, that we've ensured that mitigation measures are included in those contributions to bolster the travel plan process. So there's a member of staff at Hackney who would be able to observe that kind of any kind of concerns like that, and we could obviously liaise with our enforcement team. So it's more robust than a.
Okay. I think we know where we are on this. You know, we're used to this sort of thing happening, and there is a willingness to try and manage this, but clearly we can't guarantee. As you say, Sarah, it's a highways decision, and they haven't got these cameras in place at the beginning of the school year. They're going to struggle a bit. But I don't think we need to take it any further, really, because we know what the score is. Is that fair enough? Anybody got any different questions? I've got one that leads on from that, but Claire.
Well, just a slightly different angle on it, really, Joe. I can see obviously all the benefits of the school, having it on together, but just going back quickly to these school streets, I mean, are there any concessions for residents who perhaps don't live on the school street but live on an adjacent street, maybe have a business, need to drive, and now onto the school street that they can't drive through at that time? Do we make concessions for residents that live very close, not on the street?
I don't think we can go into this. This is getting too difficult. If we go beyond these number of streets and start opening the whole thing up about what we can and can't do with school streets, I think we know where we are. We're not going to have an answer to that question. You know, the school streets, Joe, I'm right in thinking, aren't I? If you live on the school street, you can drive in there yourself. But if you're a business, no, we can't go into that, Claire, because there are no answers to that, I don't think. Is that okay?
It's on a main road.
Steve? Well, it is a good question, but there isn't an answer. Steve?
Yeah, thank you. I suppose the core of this is that we're being asked to get rid of a condition that was imposed when the last full planning condition went through. And I suppose the only thing that's changed is these mitigation kind of measures that is that right?
Well, the original application was refused on the basis of transport. So we know it's difficult, but the Secretary of State thought it was going to be okay. So what we're trying to do here is deal with what we've got. Now, we thought we were going to have a gradual build-up, but that's not going to happen because, believe it or not, the Department for Education, of the United Kingdom cannot find a contractor to finish off a school. Well, if you can believe that, it's staggering that they've not been able to provide that temporary school that was promised. But you'll just have to make the decision on the basis of what we've got, really. So yes, the 600 pupils are going to turn up on September the 21st, whereas we were only expecting 270. And the officers clearly are bringing it here with recommendation that they've mulled it over long enough and they think that it's going to work and this is the best they can do. And I think we need. I've got one more question though. I don't know if that will help. Headmaster, your pupils arrive at 9 o'clock in the morning. All of them, 630. Are you considering? I know as part of the COVID thing, we've tried to encourage schools to stagger their opening hours. Can Year 5 arrive half an hour after Year 6 or whatever it is?
Yeah, so the plan is that there's going to be a soft start. So in fact, we have our breakfast club at 7:30 in the morning. So some of the children will enter at that point. And then at sort of 8:15, for half an hour, there is a soft start. So there'll be children entering not at the same time. So there will never be a situation where we've got 630 children trying to get into the building. That just simply won't happen. Likewise, when they're exiting as well, we've got sort of a staggered exit as well. We've got after-school clubs taking place, and there's a 1 hour sort of one that finishes at 4 o'clock, and we've got another sort of after-school club that finishes at 6 o'clock. So, in fact, at the end of the day, there are 4 exit points, exit times, in addition to a sort of a staggered 5 minutes for every year group. So once again, you will never see 630 children trying to go into the school at the same time. You will never see 630 trying to exit at the same time either.
Okay, Barry and Joe, you understand that, do you?
Yeah, that's set out in the approved documents. The operational management plan stipulates that. Yeah.
So there will be a bit of a respite in terms of the times that the bell won't ring up and 600 people will turn up. So I think we know what we're about. So if there's any more questions, Claire, have you got any more questions? I wouldn't want to stop you answering them. I just don't think there are answers to some of these things. So the recommendation is grant planning permission subject to conditions and completion of a legal agreement. And I will write a note to the cabinet member responsible for the highway saying he really needs to get his act together in terms of these school streets and do what he can, because it's part of our thinking here tonight. Is that okay? Okay, so all those in favour, please show. That is all of us. Thank you very much indeed. I hope it's a successful start, your full school opening. Right, so should we 1921? Thank you.
Have 5 minutes.
Yeah, have 5 minutes. Okay, Nick, please. Item 6, St Michael and All Angels Church, please.
Will you tell me when you can see it? Should be in presenting mode now. This is 2 applications for St Michael and All Angels Church and its yard facing Leonard Street. 2021-0537 and the associated listed building consent 2021-0538. The site is bounded by Leonard Street to the north, an alley named Mark Square to the east, and Mark Street Gardens to the south. The view looking north shows the church, which is Grade 1 listed, and the associated Grade 2 star listed group, which includes the former church school and the former clergy house. It also shows Mark Street Gardens, a Hackney-owned public park. The site is within the South Shoreditch Conservation Area. Together, the application and listed building consent propose the erection of a 5-storey plus basement office building on this yard to the south of the site, to the north of the former church, and also works to the church, including removal of existing internal structures and the erection of a new partial mezzanine floor above the aisles to enable its new use as office space. This photograph shows the northern elevation of the church with the yard in front. It's worth reflecting at this point on the architect's original vision for the church. The money for the spire never materialised, but the lofty internal volume shown in the drawing on the left is one of the features continually referred to by Historic England in our discussions during the application and pre-application process. This view along Leonard Street shows how the existing yard is an uncharacteristic break in the streetscape, which is of an otherwise relatively consistent scale and massing for this section of its length. These historic photographs highlight that the yard is resultant of the demolition of a contemporary Victorian building in 1979. The church was always designed to be surrounded by buildings. On the site of the current yard was formerly Allen's buildings. That's here, that's this building here, and this building here. This photograph shows Allen's buildings here, and also shows that Mark's Gardens were a later addition to the streetscape on the site of these buildings. As such, the principle of building on the yard is considered acceptable in order to repair a missing piece of the urban fabric. The yard itself is all concrete hard surface and temporary structures. Internally, the church has given little impression of its impressive volume in recent years. It's currently vacant, but until recently operated as an antique store and showroom along with the yard. This use was formalised by a lawful development certificate in 2015, but had been situated within the former church for many years. These photographs show the extensive internal subdivision of the church into mezzanine and smaller areas in order to better hold and display the antiques. Structural surveys show that the damage caused by the subdivision of the building was not so severe as might be expected. Nevertheless, a benefit of these applications is considered to be the removal of these subdivisions, allowing the volume of the church to be experienced once more. The ground floor plan of the proposal shows the general arrangement. The proposed new building here would keep to the established building line of Leonard Street, the deep chamfer leading to the new glazed entrance is a positive intervention, as it opens up the space next to the proposal along Mark Square. The application is entirely for office use of the 2 buildings, reflecting the priority office area the site is in. 10% of the overall floor space would be affordable workspace, provided at 60% of the locality's market rent for the lifetime of the development. The basement of the church exists already. The proposed basement for the new building includes space for the cycle storage of the new building, approximately half of which would be single tier. This proportion is reflective of the tight nature of the site and is considered to provide an acceptable mix of more accessible stands. The site has excellent public transport links, and policy-compliant levels of cycle parking are proposed. For the church, the heritage limitations of the listed building mean that we have agreed highway works to provide most of the cycle parking on the street. A blue badge space is to be provided on the neighbouring roads prior to occupation. The first floor plan shows the mezzanine that's proposed for the church. The size of this mezzanine was reduced in pre-application negotiations and is now considered to be of an optimal size to allow it to function without impacting unacceptably on the experience volume of the church. And these images show the proposed dimensions of the mezzanine. The second floor plan shows the typical arrangement of the office space, which is considered to offer a high standard of accommodation with the potential for flexible rearrangement. It's mirrored here and here. Save on the fourth floor, we have a small balcony running along the northern edge. A condition has been recommended to limit the hours of use of this balcony, and its amenity impact is considered acceptable. Indeed, as per the finding of the officer's report, there are no unacceptable amenity impacts as a result of this proposal. The roof plan shows the biodiverse green roof, which along with the proposed bird and backed boxes ensures a net gain to biodiversity at the site. You can also see the photovoltaic panels that are recommended by condition, along with the proposed air source heat pumps, the proposed BREEAM excellent rating of the new building, and a carbon offset payment. The scheme is considered acceptable with regards to sustainability, again as per the findings of the officer report. It shows the phasing of the development. The applicants have stated that the development may be delivered in 2 phases. As they've not yet decided which phase is to come forward first, a viability analysis has been carried out that shows that the church phase is deliverable on its own should the new building be developed first. As such, we are satisfied that the delivery of the church phase would not be compromised by the prior delivery of the new building phase. A clause within the recommended legal agreement requires that all high and medium risk repairs to the church are carried out in the first phase of the development. The landscaping phase, shown in green here, is required by conditions to be carried out in the first phase of the development, whichever that is. The proposed height of the building is respectful of the prevailing datum along the street, including number 72, the directly adjacent building to the west, and the WeWork building across the alley of Mark Square to the east. This elevation shows the relationship between the buildings and how the proposed chamfer opens up the route towards the glazed entrance to the church. The south elevation of the new building was improved in negotiations with the applicant to include more brick and to better harmonise with the listed building. Here you can also see the level changes leading up to the new glazed entrance. The photograph on the left here shows the level change to the existing entrance. The photograph on the right shows an attached ancillary building to the church that would be demolished in order to provide the new glazed entranceway. This ancillary building is later, and not by the original architect James Brooks, but both its demolition and the construction of the glazed entrance are considered harmful alterations. However, many of the potentially intrusive elements of the scheme, which otherwise would have to be located within the church, are located in the new entranceway. The less than substantial harm caused by demolition and the construction is acceptably balanced against the public benefit of bringing the empty church building back into use. As is laid out in the committee report, in design and conservation terms, the proposal is considered acceptable. The less than substantial harm caused to the listed building by the new building and the internal mezzanine, along with the other alterations, is considered to balance favourably with the public benefit of repair and reuse. These views down the grandly named alley of Mark Square give a good impression of how this town church, originally intended to be surrounded by buildings, will be revealed on approach around the chamfered corner of the new building. This being the same view at present. Finally, a view down Leonard Street that shows how the new building conforms to the height and massing of the neighbouring buildings and the character of the surrounding conservation area. So to conclude, the proposed application is considered to be policy compliant. It refurbishes and brings into use a vacant heritage building and repairs a missing piece of the streetscape. The use is appropriate for the priority office area, and a high standard of accommodation is proposed. As is detailed in the committee report, in these and other respects, the scheme is considered acceptable. It's recommended for approval, subject to conditions in the legal agreement.
Thank you. You had an addendum, if you could, we've only just seen it.
Yes. You mentioned that first. The addendum, just to go through it briefly, it largely is made up of amended conditions to reflect the program of the development. There's also 2 conditions, one which is about church waste collection on the street sides, making sure there's a management plan for that, and ensuring that there's public access to the church on 4 days a year. That would be a management plan coming forward to detail how that would happen.
Thank you. Okay, Tim, please.
Do I need to press a button or just?
No, this is a Google box. And
Google.
It's
Okay.
all knowing.
All knowing. Let's hope not. I just wanted to say a few words. Obviously, the officer's presentation was very comprehensive. We've been working on this proposal with officers for the last sort of 2 or 3 years. It's a Grade 1 listed building, and we've had to go into a lot of detail and taken a lot of time. So very pleased to be here tonight. I think one of the interesting things is how undervalued this sort of Grade 1 church is. A lot of people may have been in there, but I suspect a lot of haven't. And when you did, you kind of couldn't really appreciate it, as highlighted the partitions and the sort of the rooms that were created for the architectural salvage yard kind of blocked any views one would get. And I think the proposal allows it to be opened up and appreciated. It was really a sort of key positive feature, and we'll hopefully see this become a much more important building, recognised for what it is. Obviously, it delivers office space and public realm benefits, and we're very pleased with the sort of scheme as a whole. And really, just hope you have any. If you have any questions, we're here to answer them, and otherwise, you can support the recommendation.
Thank you. So over to you, members. Any questions?
Just,
Councillor Shohan.
I don't know who this goes to, but the Victorian Society talked about the internal fittings being returned to their. There's no page number. I think it's 4.64 at the bottom. It says we would expect every effort to be made to return these original fittings and incorporate them into the design. So I don't know if anyone can elaborate on whether these have happened or.
What's the intention there or the request there, Nick?
There's a number of conditions you'll have noticed on the listed building consent to do with, first of all, taking everything out, assessing what's there, repairing what's necessary. As I said, there is, in the first phase of development, medium and high risk works to be carried out. In terms of where things go, what happens exactly, those are details that will be found out at the next stage. There's so much that you can't see in the building because of all of the internal partitions that it's really a question of taking things out and then getting the details in.
So there's a requirement to make good and bring, to some degree, conserve what is there at the moment.
Exactly. If you've seen the list of conditions, they're quite extensive, and that reflects the fact that it's a Grade 1 listed building.
Does that answer your question? Claire?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Officer. I mean, obviously this is quite an unusual thing to see for us. I don't know how you see Grade 1 listed church, but I mean, I suppose I want to see that there really was a lot of public benefit to meddling in the building. And I'm not sure, I mean, is there still a demonstrable need for office space? I mean, we've got businesses in the area really overwhelmingly moving to work from home. So that's something I'd be interested in hearing officers' views on, I guess.
Okay, Nick, public benefit, and is there any need for office space?
Well, it's a priority office area. So we've identified in the local plan that there is a need for office space. There's only a very small proportion of the borough that is priority office area. I think it's 4 or 6%. That's what comes to mind. And in those areas, we prioritise office space. There's also a question, I suppose, of what's an appropriate use for the church building, given that that's the Grade 1 listed building. That's what we're interested in, particularly, I think, in these discussions. And it seems to me like it would be very high quality office space, and it would bring the church building back into use. So that answers perhaps the other side of your question, is the public benefit. Having a use for this vacant building, which was used for many years, perhaps in a way that didn't receive planning permission, that has kept it in a relatively fit state. Now we need to find another use for it. And that, I think, answers your question.
And the conservation effort that's going to go in is part of a public benefit, is it not?
Absolutely, yeah. The repairs that go into it, the opening it up in terms of removing all of the existing subdivision, the finding out exactly what's there and making sure that it's made good. All of these fit into the public benefit that is set against the less than substantial harm. I do have a heritage officer here if you want to speak to him. But,
oh, yeah. So let's hear from the heritage. Yes, is it Tim, is it?
It's Adam in this case.
Adam,
yes.
Tell us all about the heritage then of this wonderful. How many Grade 1 listed buildings do we have in the borough?
I think we've got 6, so not very many at all. So actually having a Grade 1 listed building kind of in front of us is quite a rarity. I guess, as Nick was saying, the public benefit of having it, repaired, having it back in use. I mean, for us, any listed building vacant is a concern, but a grade 1 listed building empty at the moment is always going to be concerning, and it's having an occupier that's ensuring its long-term maintenance, which this conversion will allow it to continue to function. And on the whole, it is a relatively sensitive conversion.
And the benefit of the public being able to access it as well. So 4 days a year, you'll be able to go and see this building. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, Steve.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to come in on the heritage aspects. I was about to say that there are only 9,000 grade 1 listed buildings in the country, so it's no, there's only 8
Seven,
sorry, it is special. Well, no matter where we recruit, we do see that the interventions are harmful. And I just want to be clear that there is obviously a balance to be struck, but I don't think we should take any development of the building in order to bring it back into use, because obviously these changes will be there for a significant period of time. Could the heritage officer just run through the various parts of it that are considered to be harmful, including the mezzanine? And then, do we have an assessment on what the impact on the listing status would be of this development?
Adam, please. That's a good question.
Thank you. So the harmful interventions within the church primarily are the mezzanine. The mezzanine is harmful. Nick, the officer's report does acknowledge that it's less than substantial harm. The harm has been kind of reduced as the application and pre-application discussions have undergone. So it's considerably smaller than it once was. So that it isn't a harmful intervention. It is removable. So should one day they want to reinstate the church and its kind of lofty interior, it still can be done. The mezzanine, however, does also preserve the kind of view. So as soon as you enter the church, it preserves that kind of view straight west, which is kind of the most significant view within the church. There is also a degree of harm in demolishing the late Victorian lean-to building. This, as the officer or Nick acknowledged, is a later addition. I mean, it's about 1890, I think, looking at the historic maps, not by the original architect. We think it actually might be an original boiler house or a boiler house that was kind of put in on an ad hoc basis rather than kind of intrinsically designed for the church. So they are the kind of the harm on this application. Will it impact its listing status? No. It will still continue to be a grade 1 listed building, even though it has a more modern mezzanine inside it.
Partly because English Heritage are content with the works that are proposed.
Exactly, yes.
Can you tell me, are they going to be, I remember dare I say it, the Jeffrey building, they were going to knock holes in the fabric. How are they going to assemble this mezzanine?
So they will have limited kind of trial, or they will have limited pits where they connect the metal, or kind of where the frame goes in the ground, but these are kind of very much reduced, and they've got fins as well, which kind of spread the weight evenly to ensure they don't have to go down as deep.
Okay, thank you. Steve, more?
Sorry, could I just follow up? Because obviously the glazed structure and the lift as well are identified as areas of harm in the walls, and they haven't been addressed by the...
Adam?
So the blade and the lift, I'm sorry.
The glazed area and the lift.
So the glazed area, I mean, is harm. Well, to an extent, it opens up an original view. Historically, you would have been able to see this elevation of the church, and having this glazed structure there will allow an appreciation of the south side of the church, north side of the church, which you wouldn't have had with the current building there. It also serves in that kind of significant benefit of being able to put the toilets there, which prevents any subdivision inside the church. Historically, there wouldn't have been a toilet in there, or there may have been one single toilet. So this can now have showers and toilets located secondary from the actual main grade 1 listed building. The question, was it a lift?
Yeah.
Last
plans.
So this,
it's on the last page of the plans.
Thank you. So the lift is connected for the mezzanine. I mean, it is, there is a condition on it to ensure that we have the full details, to ensure that it is as kind of frameless as possible. I think we were suggesting a bronze lift to ensure it kind of blends in well with the church. it is a harmful addition, but it kind of allows the mezzanine to function for everybody as well.
But they're not knocking a hole to get the lift in there.
I don't think so. No, not from what we've seen. It's we'll have a kind of a small pit beneath it, but it's in the kind of a least significant area of the church.
Okay.
Tim might be able to answer that question precisely, but we're asking for that to be sorted out as a detail of the application, so we can consider the lift fully when we've seen full details of the list.
You have an architect with you? So what's going to happen with the lift then?
It's a platform lift.
Okay.
So therefore it sits on the surface of the church as a standalone structure and is braced merely by the mezzanine above, so it doesn't touch any solid fabric.
Okay. Okay.
And it's entirely removable along the mezzanine. And it's purely for disabled access to the mezzanine to make sure there is full access to the whole facility.
How do we get in?
How do you get into?
So can you just set out how the lift operates? Where is it? Outside or inside?
It's inside the building.
It's inside the building.
Yeah, and sits on the side aisle. Gains access, so it sits on the floor of the church as a platform and rises directly up, so it's self-supporting and is braced by the structure of by the mezzanine above. So, like the mezzanine, it's an entirely reversible intervention.
And you'll find one of them in Hackney Town Hall. Yep, carry on.
Sorry, Chad, I just wanted to, you said that historic England have no issue, that's not quite true of what they say. They said that the proposals cause harm, less than substantial to significance of the great listed church, and they give it over to us to make a decision about what that means. So it's not, they're not quite saying that it's fine by them. Just on the several of the respondents talked about the spiral and adding that back on that seems to have disappeared from the 1950s onwards. Is that part of the plan to bring the building back into use?
I'm sorry, it might be my mic. It might be just coming through here, but I really, there's too much echo on that for me to be able to.
Is the spilet part of any plan? I was going to ask, is there passive provision to allow if somebody wants to build it?
So structural works to find out what exactly is the issue with the spilet, because obviously it's come down at some point, have been carried out in its basic form so far. We were hoping to have a little bit more, but there would need to be, at this stage, but there would need to be more work done than was possible without actually putting up quite a lot of extra equipment. So that is a condition of the approval rather than something that we've got now. It's not something that we've tied into this this permission, but Tim Gaskell, the applicant or the agent, might be able to say differently, but I cannot see that if there was a desire on the behalf of another body to reinstate the spilet, that would be a problem at a later stage. Certainly we've done all the groundwork that we can to ensure that it, once it's been surveyed, is quantifiable as a next step. I can't hear anything.
The council chamber is muted.
Apologies, sorry. Start again.
Start again, Tim.
I think it's as the case officer sets out, as with a lot of aspects of the building, there's only so much we can investigate at the present time because of the unauthorised structures that are there and the need to do surveys. So we've carried out some work, but not enough to make a conclusion definitively. In a way, it's as set out, you almost need to start doing some work which needs listed building consent in itself to be able to finish these investigations. So we've agreed a condition with officers which allows us to submit details for that and to make a decision once we have those at that time.
Okay, but it's not part of this application. And either the applicant themselves, if they are minded to, could fund it, or you could fund it, Stephen, or English Heritage, or somebody could fund it, the council could persuade somebody. But at least we'll know what the score is. Is that right?
That's correct. It would have been unreasonable to require as part of this application when we don't know how much it would cost to reinstate, which could be quite a lot.
Did you have any more? No? Go on then, keep going. Okay, Claire?
Thanks, Chair. I'm interested in the second building. public conservation. They're concerned that building that you're proposing council would present a lot of the view of the church cemetery. That seems quite serious. Why does it need to be 5 stories? Why can't you commit to doing renovations to the church first to make me more time?
Yes, I'm sorry. Could the chair summarise, please?
Nick's struggling to hear Councillor Jones.
Okay, sorry. Yes, so Councillor Joseph asked about the blocking of the views and why could the church not be just done on its own, I guess.
First, so we reassure that that works.
Okay, so done first and to reassure us that that work is going to happen before commencement of the building work on the second block.
There's a sense in which the phasing of the development is the applicant's prerogative. What we needed to find out was whether the works to the new building would prevent the later works to the church in any way. And by undertaking the viability analysis, we know that they won't, that the church phase is entirely viable on its own. If the applicant hasn't decided yet which phase is going to come forward. It will depend on market conditions. But essentially, what else we needed to do was ensure that the at-risk elements of the church were protected, even if it was in the second phase, and also that the landscaping was done in advance or as part of the first phase. You're on mute now, Chair, sorry.
There are going to be some works done on the church that are, I don't know, making it secure, weatherproof, etc., and other things. And then it's up to the applicant whether they choose to do the church, the new build, or both at the same time.
That's correct. Perhaps there was another element to the question that I skipped over as well, which was the in principle idea of having a building on the new building site. And I think I covered that in my presentation, but we are, I think, convinced that given that there was always a building on that new building site prior to 1979, that it's not a reason for refusal now that you would be blocking up a view which was never intended, that in a sense has a deleterious impact on the conservation area because it is essentially a missing piece of the urban fabric.
Sarah, please.
I've got 3 completely separate questions. Do you want them?
Ask away, yes. We keep on going until you've asked all, exhausted yourself, then we make a decision.
Number 1, Hackney Society describes unappealing verticality, which is a great phrase. I wasn't entirely sure what they meant by that, whether they just mean the height. Do you kind of have a response to?
Let's ask the officers. So officers.
Can I just give you all 3 and then you can decide what order to do them in? Second one is the development approved would be subject to a detailed delivery and servicing management plan. I suppose thinking ahead, my concern is, how well will this building be looked after when it's operating as an office building? Goodness knows who will be working there, and how do we ensure that that management plan really is sound, I guess, and enforceable. And the third one is the percentage of affordable office space, for me, is absolutely key to this. If at this point we say, yeah, we're happy with that so long as you have this percentage of affordable office space, what is the risk of coming back with an application to remove that, because we want more money out of the building and it's no longer viable to have that percentage of affordable office space.
Okay, the design officer, can you tell us what your thoughts are on the criticisms of the new build, its elevations, etc., and what do you think of it? First off, please.
Thank you. And we looked at, I think the architect and us, we all looked at Shoreditch. I mean, Shoreditch is characterised by warehouses. If we look at the other side of the road on Leonard Street, they are these kind of 4 stories, 19th century warehouses with a strong vertical emphasis, with brick pilasters kind of rising up, with kind of recessed windows and recessed brick panelling in between. And what the applicant has come up with here is a kind of a largely modern reinterpretation, picking up these same principles, the same detailing, but in a modern way, with the curve on the corner, framing the views of the Grade 1 listed building. So I wasn't 100% convinced by the Hackney Society's comment, because it does pick up on the character and appearance of the conservation area.
Seconded. Shall I take the next question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, so the service and management plan, of course, in perpetuity, looking after buildings is difficult, but yeah, please, Nick.
So maybe that wasn't the delivery and servicing plan will be for things like delivery and servicing of the site, and then there's a waste management plan as well, which is one of the addendum items. So that maybe that wasn't what the question was quite driving at. It was, how do we know that this building will be looked after? Well, there's a sense in which anybody who's in a building will want to look after the building. There's another sense in which listed buildings are protected, because you can't just make changes to them without listed building consent. There's another sense in which this is quite a robust stone building, so it's the upkeep of the building, in a sense, will be easier than it might be in a modern building, and we wouldn't particularly worry about that on a modern building. So in order to answer the question, I think we're really looking at how the building is used, and I think that hopefully that's answered the question, rather than the delivery and servicing management plan, which will be by condition, and then the condition requires that you continue to do it for the lifetime of the development.
This plan is how the building is going to be served, how the waste is going to be taken away, etc. Whether the building is maintained and kept up well is an issue for all the buildings that we have a concern about. And just like this, we hope that it will be looked after well. And you know, the planning system can only do so much. One of the things it can do is get buildings back into use rather than them, you know, fall into rack and ruin. And I think we've done what we can. Is I think what you're saying, isn't it, Nick?
Exactly. Thank you for being more succinct.
And the affordability. So the amount of affordable workspace. Can you tell us whether that's in compliance with our policies?
We do. It is in compliance.
To ensure it stays, we keep that level of affordable office space when later on it appears to come into conflict with what's seen as the viability of the building.
So that would require another application. It would require a viability analysis. Given that it's passing, it's able to provide it at the moment, I think that we would look at any such new application with quite stringent, I was going to say quite stringent eyes, but that isn't a phrase. But we would look at it stringently, and we would be able to assess it at the time.
The affordable workspace should be secured by the legal agreement, and then if there were any variations to that legal agreement, would the council to accept that and consent to it, or proceed for further application to vary. There is a separate procedure to apply to vary planning obligations, but that only becomes available several years down the line.
General question: how do we check that these officers are continuing to operate with 10% affordability at 80% of market? Is there any regime to go and find out what's happening on the street?
All of the things that are in the heads of terms are monitored. That's how we monitor. We monitor everything in the heads of terms.
Okay, you go and check, do you?
It's not my job, but we have a monitoring department, yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Right, any more? Claire?
I've got two on the chair. First is a report under 6 to mention significant impacts in 1973 initially. We didn't get any percentages provided. I'm just wondering how much light is going to be tracked for those people residential property. And the second concern that we've got is that whether or not we stay in our local plan, I think the reality is there's a lot of pandemic. People people aren't using it. My suspicion is that this may eventually come back as a change of use to take it to a residential accommodation. So I'm just wondering, is there any kind of way that we can resist that or anything in our community?
Councillor Joseph, can I say you can wander as much as you wish. What we've got to look at is the application in front of us. And so, we have to take it on face value, the application we've got. So we can't think what might happen in the future. It's just not valid at all, I'm afraid.
Well, we may have an out-of-date policy around.
No, we don't have out-of-date policies. We have policies that we try and apply. And if they, over time we can look at them. But at the moment, all we've got to go on is our role in life is to look at the application in front of us and compare them to our policies. But your question on 6.62 was a light issue for a residential.
I'm catching up, Chair, because I couldn't hear what was being said before, but it's 6.62. Would you just...
6.62, there's a lighting issue, and...
On 73 Leonard Street, I think.
75 Leonard Street.
So it's a question about the daylight sunlight.
Yes.
I mean, there is an impact. Obviously, there's not a lot of residential around there. There is an impact, but it's within the range that we would consider acceptable for this location. Obviously, given that you've got essentially a yard there at the moment, it's likely that anything going on that site would create an impact. But one of the things we're supposed to look at is this building out of scale for its surroundings? Clearly, it isn't. Also, the impacts that you do see are within what you'd consider to be the RE guidance as interpreted by Hackley in general.
Okay, so the officers think it's an acceptable loss of light. So Nick, why is there not a percentage? We're normally given the percentage of light that's lost compared to whatever.
Well, I mean, it's in the daylight sunlight report. I can get it up for you. There is percentage. It's been submitted. I don't have it to hand, but I can get it up for you if that's helpful. It might take me a little while.
Okay, 1 minute. Okay, so Claire, the officers are content that this is within the tolerance that we would accept, and we won't be. They're suggesting we wouldn't be able to refuse on the basis of this. Okay, any more questions? Steve, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to question officers on the lack of retail kind of space. That street is relatively well used with active frontages with retail on the street. It's obviously quite entirely office-based development. And what was the thinking behind that?
You talk about the new build.
The new build.
Okay, so with the new build, why is there no retail in there, Nick?
Actually, if you look down that street, there isn't. It's not a retail street, and it's a priority office area. So in terms of the use, it's entirely within. It's within the policy that we would apply. If you're talking about getting active frontages down that street, it would be the only one on that stretch of Leonard Street. So it would be an outlier in that sense.
That's what you mean by stretch.
So our policies are not looking for retail in that area of Shoreditch. Indeed, there's probably too much retail in that area of Shoreditch. Any more questions? I've got a few. AJ.
Just a minor question, like you touched on it. It's open to the public 4 times a year. Is there any way is there a communal space where people can just walk in and just view it limitedly? Because that is a 16th century building with historic glass panes, and it's of value to people. And it'd be nice if people just walk in to a little area. They might not be able to see the whole building, but as long as they could see it, some parts of it.
Tim, can we ask you to go away with officers and work up the plan for public access? Because I know it's a new additional item.
Yeah, so in the addendum report, Chair, there is a condition that the officers have suggested which would require details of the management plan to be submitted. And that is how we would envisage having that discussion. How those arrangements work are very much down to the the user of the office, and obviously we don't know who they are and how they'll operate it and what sort of arrangements they would sort of need to take in board. So that's why we felt that a condition was the best way to have that discussion.
Okay. We can add that as an informative, if people turn up and want to have a look at the church, then we might be able to find a way of doing it, if at all possible. Is that okay, Nick?
I mean, we can certainly put it in there. It's a private office, obviously, so it's part of the discussion that we need to have.
It is unusual to have access to, there are many private listed buildings that you clearly can't go into. And so this is is breaking a bit of ground here.
There are many camps.
There are many, yeah, they're owned by the National Trust. They're not owned by somebody trying to do a bit.
Go to the Bloomberg building, go to,
Okay.
I've got theatres that are now open because of the historic interest with it.
It might inspire some children.
Yeah,
the planning committee.
there is a move that you should be able to open your street to the building. Anyway, we should be grateful for what we've got.
It's a very easy thing to do to look on Google Maps and look at the retail units that are down that street. It is not true to say that street has no retail units. And we do get a bit of this sometimes whereby you get a response saying that one thing which is not necessarily totally true. If it's a stretch of about 100 metres maybe, but that street does have retail units. But my favourite wine shop, that's from
Yeah, but the point is that our policies are looking for officers. Priority office. Okay, Nick, would you explain again or tell us again your reflection? Steve thinks there are some shops on that street, and therefore.
Are we talking about Leonard Street, or are we talking about
Leonard Street?
Yeah, there's definitely retail on Leonard Street.
So I was walking down Leonard Street not that long ago, the street that I used to live on, and I was looking specifically for residential addresses above the entrances for obvious reasons, and my impression was that what I was seeing was offices with shop fronts rather than retail. I didn't see the off license. My apologies if I was in any way inaccurate, but I certainly didn't remember that. In terms of the policy suggests that we don't require an active frontage, that we're looking in these small areas that we do have of priority office areas to encourage as much office as possible. I'd also remind people that we've lost a lot of offices recently because of prior approvals and things like that. So there is nothing to refuse this application on, and the fact that it doesn't have a active frontage at ground floor level in terms of a retail use. That's not a reason for refusal here.
Thank you. Claire.
A question for the applicant, please. I'm just wondering, have you considered not having a mezzanine? Not having it? Is it possible to still use it the way you'd like?
I think the starting point for us is obviously to try and find a use and an amount of a use which is viable for the long-term basis of the church, and that needs a certain volume of sort of floor space, and in this case desks, and they will obviously generate an income, and you need that kind of income to maintain the church. So for us there was an element of it's got to be a viable solution, otherwise in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, someone's going to be back here saying, the church, I can't afford to fund the long-term maintenance of the church. So there was that driver. There was also a driver that actually we felt that, the way the mezzanine's being designed, it will help to create and almost funnel the views. So you'll have seen on the sort of visuals at the start how you can still appreciate the view, but because you've got the mezzanine sitting in the wings, it's not impacting on that. So we felt that actually that, and perhaps the buzz of people talking, working on those kind of spaces will help to create an environment that's attractive to office users. And I suppose the final point is actually from the mezzanine itself, you will get very interesting views of the church. You'll be able to get closer to the stained glass. You'll get different views than you might do at ground level. So, we had a lot of discussion with officers about how big the mezzanines were, where they went, and the result is a sort of quite a detailed dialogue. But those were some of the reasons for that.
And I think the value of office space in Shoreditch does suggest that there is a demand for offices pre-pandemic.
Yes, I mean, it's worth saying that obviously we started with this site pre-pandemic, and it was a very different market, as you say, and certainly it'd be much easier to bring this development forward then as it is now. But that said, you are seeing people going back to work in offices. As the officer highlighted, there's been a lot of space lost through the prior approval process, and the way the government's going, that's probably going to continue. And equally, there's a lot of emerging guidance about density of staff within offices being reduced. People aren't going to perhaps be able to get the same numbers in. So whilst you might have less people working in an area, they may still need the same amount of space. So, clearly there's an element where we have to see what's going to happen. But the sort of forecast suggests that, London is going to recover as a financial city, and, the demand for office space will continue.
Your colleagues just passed you something.
Sorry, I was just about to say it's a special building, so there will be a lot of occupiers that will be attracted to that building in that location.
Okay.
It's one of a kind, really. Well, it's not one of a kind, there's 6 of them in Hackney, but I mean, it really is one of a kind in terms of that. So in one sense, it needs the kind of people who will go for this building, hopefully will be interested in that, regardless, because they'll want that special.
Do you actually own this building?
The applicants do, yes.
Yes.
Not me personally. So,
You own it, but obviously any alterations are, must something being great. It's interesting to me that the church doesn't own it.
Sorry, I can't hear you now.
Sorry, I'm just interested how you could own a great massive church like what the church.
So the church sold the building in the 70s? 60s. So it was deconsecrated as a church in the 60s, I guess, I suspect, because there were no parishioners, and they sold it at that point. And then for most of its life, it was used as a sort of architectural salvage place. You could go in there and you could buy, a Spitfire propeller or a
old chimney pot.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Fascinating. But the owners of who were then running it as and that business have moved out to, I think, Barnet, Willesden. So for them, Shoreditch was changing, and it wasn't quite the area they wanted to be in. So hence it was on the market. But no, it hasn't been in a sort of religious use for many decades now.
I've got a couple of questions. One is there are steps in this landscaping. That makes it inaccessible. I wonder, are we forced to have steps? I'll ask that to Nick. What's the story with steps? We can't make it step-free.
We can make it step-free, and so there's a condition requiring us to put in details of a permanent ramp. This is something that was raised at a relatively early stage and never really got resolved during this application, but there's no reason we can't resolve it at the next stage, so a ramp will go in as part of the detail.
Okay, thank you. And it talks about cycle parking. Is the cycle parking going to go on the carriageway on the street, Joe? We're not going to put it in the garden or on the pavements or anything else like that, are we?
That's certainly my understanding, Chair. Because the cycle parking will be managed as part of the Section 278 works. It'll be our teams who are planning and designing that. And
that's what worries me.
Obviously, we would absolutely uphold installing cycle parking in the carriageway unless there's an extenuating circumstance.
Okay, thank you.
One that I'm aware of.
Okay, that's been very interesting. Any more questions? Anybody? Brian?
Just for my clarification.
1 minute. Where's Humara? She just left. She just left? Yeah. 1 minute. Let's adjourn for 30 seconds then.
She needed because she can't participate in the vote.
Say again?
She can't participate in the vote.
Oh, she's already just... Yeah. Okay. Brian, please ask.
Just for my clarity, the affordable workspace element What about in the developments that to be provided?
So it's approximately 51% above at ground level and approximately 49% at basement level.
In which building?
In the new building.
Okay. Any more questions? No. Okay. So Hamar, that's a lesson to learn. If you leave the while the item is in progress, you don't vote on it.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Can I just ask you to
Yeah,
clarify
surely.
one point?
Yeah.
On the issue of public access, are you satisfied with the condition that on the addendum, of course, of page 6, is that enough to satisfy?
I think we're satisfied, but we were going to add an informative to say we'd like to officers to investigate the possibility of it being a walk-in viewing possibility.
Above and beyond what is proposed?
Yeah, yeah.
And is that agreed by?
Yeah, that was your, yeah, so we can't, I don't think we want to dictate it tonight, but that's the way.
It's just for the minutes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so any more? So the recommendation is grant planning permission subject conditions and completion of a legal agreement and the conditions that we've talked about. All those in favour, please show. Are there any against? One against, any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Shall we have another break?
Yeah.
Stop.
Hello, Hayley and Bruce. Could you put your cameras on? So while you're taking part, you can have your cameras on.
Hayley?
We got as many as we're going to have here.
Sorry.
So, are we ready? Can we close the door, son?
So who have we got?
Okay, Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just bring up the presentation. Can everyone see okay?
Steve, yes. Can we note for the minutes that Steve has left?
Councillor Race has left the room.
Because of his declaration of interest. He's on the Shoreditch Trust or something.
Okay.
And Councillor
Garcia left as well. I've noted it, got it on the minutes.
Okay, so item 7, Shoreditch Park, Bridport Place. This is the application red line plan, which sort of covers the whole of Shoreditch Park, and then the blue line just includes other land in the council's ownership, which is the Britannia Leisure Centre and land around that. And now I've got a few photos showing Shoreditch Park. So these are some views looking down Bridport Place from within the park, looking to the south, looking eastwards towards Britannia Leisure Centre, recently completed. This is on the north side of the park, some of the sort of works of improvement to the park which have been delivered as part of the Britannia Leisure Centre scheme. And looking westwards, existing play area, looking towards New North Road, looking north westwards with Gainsborough Studios in the background, the play area, existing play area. Looking northwards up Bridport Place, the things to note there, I suppose, are the historic lamppost columns just on the one side of this route, and then the entrance to the park from Bridport Place, and the southern boundary of the park and the existing play area. This is the existing adventure play area with this sort of screen plant landscaping around it and fencing. And the thing to note here is that the proposed sports facilities, the Moog, will be going into this area, and these trees here are going to be relocated. I'll show that further in some of the following slides. The adventure play area itself, you can just see behind that head, the fence, the existing building, which is going to be demolished and replaced with a new building. The southern boundary with Minturn Street looking northwards into the park, and again, and then just another sort of view showing across the park, and again then looking westwards, and then looking down Minturn Street. So that's the boundary with the adventure play area there with the street, and then this is the southeast corner of the park, Dorothy Thurtle Gardens entrance there from Pitfield Street, and within Dorothy Thurtle Gardens there's a mound, public artwork at the top there, and this sort of worn path through, and then this is the gap between the leisure centre and Dorothy Thurtle Gardens with the main park. So application site notice on the corner of Bridport Place and Minturn Street at the entrance to the park. Just a bit of history. The park previously used to be terraced houses and streets, including Bridport Place. That's a sort of historic route that ran through the park. A lot of bomb damage during World War II, and lots of the buildings were cleared from the site, and temporary housing was constructed around between 1950 1960, and then by 1990, that all the existing buildings had been demolished on the site, and the public park use, as it is now, had was instated. Just some historic photos. Clift Street on the left, that used to be a street within the park, and Dorothy Thurtle Gardens in 1973 with the temporary housing.
Sorry, Stephen. If you could wait to listen to the officers,
okay,
and then you can ask as many questions as you want. You can bring it up and we can go on all night, Sarah, if we need to. Sorry, Steve, could go back to the, roll back a couple of slides.
Just that one.
So,
Can I just ask one question about that?
no, we don't do it like that.
So
Please.
this is the just a bit of background on the historic development on the park. There's previously streets across the park. There was a lot of bomb damage from World War II, with some streets cleared and temporary housing built on the park. You can see sort of between 1950 1960, before I think circa 1980 the park sort of became the park as in its current form. And then these are just sort of historic photos. Cliff Street on the left, which used to be within the park, and Dorothy Thurtle Gardens there 1973 with the temporary housing behind it. This is just an overview of the park proposals. So you've got a proposed new play area on the site of the existing play area, a sports tree plaza area at the entrance to Bridport Place, new building in the adventure play area, and improvements of Dorothy Thurtle Gardens and other sort of landscape type.
Sorry, Steve, they've lost connection. Can you pause a moment, please?
Okay.
Just Steve, you were given us a general overview of the park.
Yeah, so general overview of the park, the proposals, new children's play area on the site of the existing play area, improvements to Bridport Place, new sports facilities in this location here, close to the sort of park entrance of Bridport Place, with a new Mooga, relocated beach volleyball, new tree plaza in this area, a new building within the adventure playground to replace the existing, and also improvements in Dorothy Thurtle Gardens. Children's play area, the proposals here with these sort of mounds, lots of sort of natural features, landscaping, natural elements, sand and timber. The idea being with connection with the park and nature, sort of maximising that really. Natural, and then the range of play equipment proposed. And there will also be other sort of opportunities for play distributed around the park. For instance, there's a play trail within Dorothy Thurtle Gardens. The rain gardens along Bridport Place will also offer kind of opportunities for play, not just in the children's play area. And then also the other sort of main area of improvement is this sports facilities area. So you've got the new Mooga with a ball stop fence and floodlighting, and the beach volleyball court and an outdoor gym facility. Tree plaza here with new trees planted. There's also the Javelin Man statue. I'll sort of show that in another slide following that. There are a couple of other sort of service facilities here. There's a welfare facility, a storage container, and these are kind of shipping container type structures, but they're clad with a green roof and timber cladding. You can see that. So yeah, in terms of the Javelin Man sculpture, he used to be in front of the old Britannia Leisure Centre. There's a planning condition on that Britannia permission for him to be relocated, and he will be relocated here which we think is a good location for him, as it's a sort of prominent place and it within Shoreditch Park and not far from where he was before. In terms of the tree works, there are 11 trees that are small trees that will need to be relocated. They won't be removed, they'll be relocated to alternative locations nearby. And this is the storage containers next to the Muga, and you can see, I think members may remember from the pre-app subcommittee where these proposals were discussed back in January, and there were concerns raised at that time about the appearance of having some storage containers on the park. And so the proposal is to clad these with timber, with options for sort of climbing planting and a green roof on the top as well, to soften their appearance. Dorothy Thirtle Gardens, this image shows some of the changes here. The proposal is to remove the existing railings around this space, reinstate with a native hedgerow and other sort of, as a play trail introduced here, also a new path where that worn path was, a desire line through. And also there are a number of biodiversity enhancements proposed in terms of the native hedgerow planting around the edges, log piles, insect hotels, wildflower meadow, and rain gardens along Bridport Place. It shows some images showing the sort of enhancements that are planned, and the rain gardens along Bridport Place. So they'll help to drain the hard surfaced areas that have been introduced, for instance, the Muga and the path, but in a sustainable way. It will be attractive and opportunities for play as well with water. And there's also some improvements around the boundary of the adventure playground. So this fence here is going to be realigned so that there's just a bit more openness between Dorothy Thirtle Gardens and the main park. Some new planting behind the fencing around the adventure playground. The building within the adventure playground, this plan just shows the sort of ground floor plan. This provides facilities to support the use of the adventure playground, toilets, and so on, and elevations. It's a single-story building, but it does have a terrace sort of space at the top, with other sort of play features with slides and climbing walls and so on. There have been a bit of discussions about the materials of this building and its appearance, and the plans don't show too much, but the intention is that this will be a simple kind of concrete block construction to the walls, but they'll be painted with murals with input from local children as to the sort of design of the mural. And members, just draw members' attention to the addendum report where we're proposing a condition to require that. And also just an amendment to the tree condition, the landscaping condition, to require details of trees planting, just to looking at the potential to sort of increase the sizes of some of the trees and species to get more shade cover into the areas where the trees are most tree planting proposed. The rest of the recommendation is as per the report. Thank you, Chair.
Applicant, please.
I've got no formal presentation. I'm Catherine Hay, Project Manager from Parks and Green Spaces team, and James is the Landscape Architect from LUC. We represent the Shoreditch Park Improvement Project, but we've got Bruce and Hayley online who represent the Adventure Playground application. If you've got any questions, we'll be time for them.
Thank you. Sarah.
No, my
Please.
was answered later in the presentation.
Okay. Very good. Any questions, anybody? I've got a couple. Claire, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you all. Yeah, it looks good. A couple of things. There's a sandy area currently in that park, quite popular for smaller children. Just wondering, are we going to be well, the new playground equipment, I saw a lot of wood, which I think is quite good. Metal gets really hot, especially when we have these heat waves. So just wanted to be an insured area. And finally, any toilets?
Yeah, so the toilets are available at Britannia Leisure Centre, that's just opened up, which is, yes, yeah. No, you don't need to, there's a side entrance which is accessible to everybody. The beach volleyball court is currently in the playground. That's being relocated, but we are implementing a sand pit within the playground, so there's sand play available. And the other question, timber, it's mainly timber, isn't it?
Yeah, so we've gone for like a more of a naturalistic kind of look. So lots of timber, which is kind of like tactile and warm. Like I say, doesn't overheat in the summer. But obviously that kind of comes with a robustness issue as well. So we're trying to get bits of equipment that actually have kind of like metal feet. So the timber is essentially off the ground, but it's predominantly timber.
Thank you.
AJ.
Yeah, you got City of London Academy close by. Would they have exclusive use of the mug? Like in Hagston Park, we've got Bridge Academy using that from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock each day. So have they got contracts to use specific equipment, or is it open to the public all the time?
It will be open to the public all the time, but I think management of timing, that there might be some arrangements with the Adventure Playground and also the schools. That hasn't been established yet.
Can I ask then, on the basis of that, I mean, the arrangement for the use of the Muga is important. Is it a public Muga, or is it a school Muga, or is it a bit of both? And I wonder, does it say anywhere in the planning application what's going to be happening with it? I know there was some controversy about the Shoreditch one, because the academy, and they now use it exclusively.
There's no plans to lease the Muga. It's accessible to the public.
Okay. So there are no plans. Okay. So we're not looking at any proposal to divvy up the time of the. It might happen, but it'd be another department that does it, I guess, if they.
The informal. So.
Okay, Sarah.
I just wanted to hear a bit more about the Adventure Playground and, the use and management of what's proposed for the Adventure Playground and how it would be.
At the Play Hut?
Yeah.
Hayley, are you available to?
So Hayley and Bruce, was it?
Yeah, so I'm Hayley Birch. I'm the Practice Development Manager for Play and Sport within Young Hackney. So the Adventure Playground falls under Young Hackney. So it's one of our kind of universal play settings for adventure play within the borough. It's solely managed by Young Hackney for young people from the local area. And we predominantly have young people aged 6 to 15 who use the playground. We've currently got 500 young people who are registered to use the playground, but we also get young people who drop by who aren't registered. So we can sometimes on days have up to 150 young people in the playground space. The young people at the playground, they've been involved in all stages of the design of the playground, and some of the features that you see there have come back from the feedback from young people. They were quite adamant that they would like a playable roof space, a space that they can use for quiet reflection time, but also to house some of the pets that we've got at the Adventure Playground. They also wanted a slide from the roof as well, and that's been incorporated into the design. We try to make the Play Hut as playable space as possible. So that's why we've also got kind of a climbing wall as well there. But the indoor space is very flexible. It can allow us for like soft play activity to take place, as well as kind of quiet activities as well. We've also got toilets.
Sorry, Hayley, they've lost connection again.
Okay.
Haley disappeared.
Haley, you were talking about the slide.
More about the plans for the adventure playground.
The plans.
Proposed, and particularly, as you were saying, what young people had fed in, perhaps including things that they'd fed in that we haven't been able to incorporate as well.
Sorry, my screen froze a little bit there, but I think, yeah, so keeping an ethos with the Venture Playground and it all being child-led, young people have been really integral into the design that we've got for the new play hut, so incorporating the playable roof space, the slide. We also wanted to have that outdoor-indoor feel of the building, so on the rear elevation we've got bifold doors which allow the play hut to be open so that children can be inside and outside. It's also got a covered space so that if it is kind of raining, we can also still deliver kind of play activities at the playground. One of the big things about this new play hut is the accessibility. So it is it's all on one level, and so it will be accessible by young people who've got mobility issues as well. We've also got toilets that can be accessed from the outside of the building, so young people don't necessarily have to come into the main play space, which means then it kind of opens it up to being hired out by users who can come into the building to use the welfare facilities but not access the play space. And also that's made it COVID proof as well. So over the past year, because of COVID, and we've kept the play hut closed. And I guess the new design of the play hut means that we can still operate under COVID on the Adventure Playground, but still have those the welfare facilities, the toilets, without the children having to use the main play hut space. Okay, so I hope that answers some of the questions.
Questions? I've got two. One is about the fencing height of the Muga. Can you tell me how high it's going to be?
It's currently proposed at 2.8 metres, which
Okay.
is slightly smaller than a standard Muga.
It's about the same as London Fields, is it?
I think we would be following this.
That's a good model. Okay. I remember when they were about 16 feet at some point, you know.
Same thing.
Okay. And the thing about the trees, we mentioned it at the pre-application. I don't know if you were here. We did lose a load of plane trees from that park, and so we'd like the parks to take the opportunity to put them reinstate some plane trees, decent sized trees. I hope that can be part of it. And Steve, you've written that into somehow, have you, into the plan?
Yeah, in the addendum report, we've tweaked the wording of the landscape condition. I think, you know, from discussion with Life, the tree officer, we wanted to make sure that the trees in the tree plaza have a good canopy coverage and shade. So I think he may be able to sort of talk a bit more about this. Whether he sees plane trees as necessarily being a sort of appropriate species in that location.
Okay, Leif, it might not be appropriate, but I'm just asking for it because of the amount we lost, and if at all possible, can that be considered?
We will consider all trees with a broad canopy. There are many different plane trees and many other trees that could be used as a shade in the tree plaza. Yeah.
Can I ask a supplementary to that about the foliage? So, sorry to be ignorant. I'm ward councillor in Woodbury Down. In Woodbury Down, there's been a lot of sort of planting as part of regeneration.
Yes.
The edges of, sort of around the edges, and a lot of that planting, apart from the trees, the sort of hedges around have been rather unimaginative, and they're certainly not things you could kind of play in and around and about. They're just there to, they look a bit plastic. They're sort of stuck there with spiky leaves. In amongst these trees, and I maybe haven't understood the pictures very well here, is it just trees that you're planting here, or are you planting kind of shrubs and bushes around as well? Or, what, can you give me a bit of a flavour?
Sure, yeah. It's kind of split into two sections in a way. So there's a grassed section, which is literally just trees and grass, some logs, in, so you can kind of informally sit in that area. Then there's a paved space, which has got the Javelin Man statue within it. Some seats that actually face the statue and lines up with the beach volleyball court as well. So there's a nice kind of access kind of through that, but with seats dotted around it as well. So depending on what the weather is, what time of year it is, you can kind of use either space. It was something that came out of the consultation really earlier on, that a lot of people felt that the park didn't have a heart, a centre to it. So it was about trying to create a more of a central, inward-looking kind of focal point where someone could actually sit, either in the sun or in the shade, a meeting point for people. But it's also kind of quite a good node point the sports pitch, most of the other entrances as well.
Yeah, sounds good.
So when I'm looking at this page.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I can see, sorry, behind. I understand the circles to be trees. What are the squiggles? The squiggly green bits?
So the kind of the zigzag line throughout is the existing vegetation. Within the adventure playground boundary, we're not doing any landscape work at all apart from the play paths. So it's just Dorothy Thurston Gardens in that corner.
And you went with taking the railings out eventually. So that was up for a debate, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we're removing the railing, proposing to remove the railings on the two sides of Dorothy Thurston Gardens.
Okay.
But you see there are some quite mature trees along that edge, but there's some additional hedge planting, logs, boulders, just to kind of act as kind of vehicles.
So there's a bit of a boundary.
Yeah, where the gaps are. But essentially, it was to make it feel a lot more open, blur the boundary between.
Okay. Be interesting. I cycle past it and never go in it because of the railings. So be good. Okay, any more questions, members? So the recommendation summary is to grant conditional planning permission. All those in favour, please show. That is all of us. Thank you. Okay, so sorry about that. We cut out just as we were in the middle of the vote, but we actually did vote, and all of us were in favour of the recommendation for Shoreditch Park. Thank you very much. Is
And
that
Chair,
okay?
one last item.
And the last item that I always have to be reminded about is the delegated decisions. So for Sarah, have a look at all those delegated decisions. Those are most of the things that officers spend their time on, the smaller, less contentious decisions that the council makes. But we put them on a public paper so that people can have a look. So those for noting, please note.
Chair, obviously, I know we've got an AOB agenda item, but nobody's really got any AOB items.
No, there are no AOB items.
And the dates for the next few planning meetings are also on the agenda as well.
I thought we'd done that, hadn't we?
I think we just put them on there for information.
Okay,
Yeah,
for information.
next meeting is
Okay.
1st of September.
Thank you very much indeed. So have a good break.
Thank you, everybody.
See you
Thank
the
you, Chair.
1st of
Thank you,
September. Sarah, if you've got any questions, let me know, and I'll tell you why I shouted to you.